Hey folks, welcome back. So I'm back again with some Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition stuff. Just got my copy of Writ of the Wilds. This is relatively hot off the presses from Edge Studios. So people have been waiting for this one for a while. This is the Essential Guide to Wilderness Survival in Rokugan. We flip over to the promo text on the back here. So we get several new schools, including traditions allowing play as Shinomen Naga, Shinomen Nezumi, Tengu, and Yobanjin, so new species basically. We get rules for the Dragonfly Minor Clan, new titles, conditions, techniques, and a variant terrain type. And for the GM, you get guidance on running campaigns for groups of mixed species and allegiances. Additionally, details on various wilderness locales, temples, and running monasteries authentically can be found in this volume. And you can see the big Edge Studios logo here. So yeah, this is a new production for the RPG. Very good to see that. I do hope that they come out with some more stuff soon. For the other major clans, I can see there's been a little bit of debate on Reddit and other places that I've seen about the relative value of this book, whether it has enough kind of crunch and spice and things that people like. I'm going to go ahead and sort of disagree with the complaints, I think, mainly because I've already done a video about this, and it was an hour and 20 minutes long like all the other ones. So I don't feel there's particularly much less content in this than the other sort of 144-page expansion books that we've looked at, but I am actively trying to make my videos a bit shorter. We'll see if we can succeed today, but no promises. Anyway, right from the start, you see we've got beautiful cover art as usual. We've got a very sort of apprehensive looking Bushi with his katana out, lurking through the forest here. We've got what looks like a dead kappa there with a dish of water on his head open and his eyes all rotted out and decayed. We've got some weird old man at a jaunty angle. We've got spooky spirit there lurking in the background. We've got some crows hanging about. It's all fairly ominous, and that's kind of a theme of this book. There's some weird stuff happening in the forest, in the wilds of Rokugan in general, so this book is about how to survive. We're all familiar with this end paper art by now, and on the GM screen. Still beautiful though. And of course we get a nice look at the full art without the logos as usual. But yeah, I think there's actually a lot to drive interesting campaigns in this book. I mean, they seem to have taken up a little bit more space than usual with certain things, I will say that. And I could see areas where they could have expanded on some stuff, but we'll get to that later on. But there is a lot of interesting new things in here for both the player and for the GM. I like the idea of, running around in the wilds of Rokugan and not just between all the ports and cities and stuff. So, it's got good thoughts behind it, at the very least. So, what's in the book? Chapter 1, The Secret Empire, focuses on the wilds of Rokugan and the various species and creatures that live within them, including the Tengu, the mysterious Shinomen Mori Naga, and the Tattered Ear, a tribe of Nezumi living deep within the Shinomen. Beyond the Empire's borders, this chapter introduces the diverse set of peoples known to most Rokugani as the Yobanjin, who dwell far to the north and even within Rokugan itself. Finally, the families of the Dragon Clan are discussed, as well as the role of temples in the Empire. It's a lot for one chapter. Chapter 2, we get the duty of survival, so this is all about the Dragonfly clan, basically. So you get some rules for creating PCs for this dignified and well-respected, if not well-liked, minor clan. They offer new and exciting player options, including schools, items, techniques, blah blah blah. Chapter 3, Finding Balance and Disorder, offers game masters advice on how to incorporate the elemental imbalance into games, how to create authentic and culturally sensitive monastic orders, and how to tell stories with groups of players that differ in species. Lastly, new terrain, disease conditions, and new titles are available to add more diversity into adventures in Rokugan. So I think, to me at least, the first part, there's bits of fluff and crunch mixed throughout in these 3 different chapters, right? So in the beginning, we get a lot of what the wilds of Rokugan are like, where they're located, generalistic things about wilderness survival, all that sort of stuff. But there are rules that go along with it. There's new species introduced, there's new cultures introduced. Likewise, in chapter 2, we get a whole new minor clan to play with all the excitement that comes with that. And in the last chapter, alongside the GM tips, we've got new titles, we've got new terrain types, we've got details about what monastic life is like. So these are all things that can help in your campaigns, particularly if you're interested in the Dragon Clan, the Dragonfly, and the kind of wilds in which they live and lord over. So from that perspective, I've been pretty happy with this so far. I've only given it sort of a quick read through. Basically, in the beginning, there's a general introduction to the wilds of Rokugan, moving from east to west, how you go through different climates, and then we get some interesting stuff here about survival. So the wilds of Rokugan are pretty untamed, basically, and you really can't approach it lightly. There's wild animals, tough terrain, there's bad environmental dangers, supernatural things. It can get real bad, so most samurai rarely spend extended periods far from civilization, and if they do go, you're good to bring some protection with you. And then there's some sidebars here about certain people who do wander quite a bit. People like Imperial Cartographers, Lone Warriors, which we'll talk about in Path of Waves, which I also got recently, or ascetic Shugenja, who seek communication with nature. So there are people who do wander and are not actually lost, but for most people, it's a tough gig to wander about in the wilds of Rokugan. And in fact, they talk a lot about how you would prepare for something like this. So you need to bring suitable clothing for any of the environments in which you intend to stay. You need appropriate ways to get shelter, food, protection. You need to be able to light fires for cooking, for warmth. You need sort of dried foods and vegetables, things that you can pack well that will stay for a long time. Probably want to try and plan your route with people who know what they're talking about. You want to avoid bandits. If you're a samurai, you would usually go with attendant. So that kind of maintains your dignity, as well as just, you can kind of send them ahead to go and get eaten by the baddies before they come to get you. And then, they would hire a guide often. So you try and get one of the locals in the area to lead you through so that you don't get lost in the deep, dark woods, which seems to make a lot of sense to me. And similarly, there's advice for traveling light. So if you're tromping through the forest, bringing lots of stuff with you and carts full of materials and things like that, you attract the attention of bandits, predators. Creatures will come and raid your camps. Maybe bears will show up and make off with your food, or you may disturb the local area and its supernatural denizens. Better to travel light and efficiently. Make sure that you make your way to where you need to go with a minimum of disruption and leave these kind of scary wilds alone. That's difficult, of course, in wartime, where sometimes, armies tend to try and avoid difficult terrain, but there are reasons where sometimes you have no other choice, right? You need to go and confront a fortress full of notorious bandits hidden in a fortress and in a mountains or whatever. You'll have to take your forces through cumbersome terrain. You're going to run into dangers and mud and muck, and people get lost and conditions become harder. Provisioning becomes harder. So that can be a real issue when you're dealing with the mass warfare side of the game, if you're into that sort of thing. There's not real mechanics so far kind of behind that, but it definitely gives you ideas for how you could make things more difficult on an invading army if you were dealing with warfare in that kind of situation. And there's an interesting sidebar here about a disease that some people get. Well, not disease exactly, but a kind of madness called hitsu. So in places where there's a lot of influence from the spirit realms, sometimes people get what's called hitsu, and they basically get sudden compulsions that they can't resist. So they'll suddenly start to abandon their compatriots and run into the deep woods. They'll run off cliffs, or they'll just become animal-like and sort of feral. The condition is not permanent, people can come back from it, but often they die anyway because they end up doing something stupid. So watch out for that. In general, there's lots of interesting sidebars in this book about things you might run into outside of the roads and connections between clan territories versus the areas that lie off those roads. There can be quite a difference in quality. One of the things you need to be aware of course, in the wilds is yokai and spirits. So travelers are frequently warned to be wary of intelligent, shape-shifting beings commonly known as yokai, and there are a few types of them that are described here. So we've got kitsune, which were in the previous book, actually, Celestial Realms. So they're playable species as well. There are shape-shifting badgers called mujina, river otters called kawauso, and raccoon dogs or tanuki. And they're known to bewitch or play tricks on travelers. Some may actively try to hinder you. Some may simply be curious. Some may just want to screw around with you for no real reason. Then we get into this a kind of theme that appears a few times in the book, which is the elements being out of balance. So, of course, central part of the theme of these books, the whole line, is that there are 5 elements: the earth, fire, air, water, and the eternal void. There are many different ways of interpreting them, but basically when these elements are out of balance, it could be caused by a disharmony between these elements. So they talk about things like storms, tsunami, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and some supernatural occurrences. And so it was the Phoenix clan, apparently, that first noticed something awry. So they had a dry season that stretched into years, and then they tried to correct what they thought was an imbalance where they had too many fire kami, fire spirits in the area, because the simplest of fire spells resulted in extreme effects. Right? So they said, well, let's make loads of offerings and trying to attract water kami and stuff. And then this seemed to have no effect until there was a massive wave that decimated the whole Crane coastline. So the imbalance of the elements seems to be actually much bigger than just what's happening in the land of the Phoenix. So there's kind of a story hook going here where you could build a potentially big campaign crossing the whole Emerald Empire, potentially, if you wanted to look into that. There's a nice sidebar here, too, as well, about how all the great clans view the supernatural. So the crab, naturally, they're the most kind of used to it. They deal with the evils of the Shadowlands all the time, so they encounter supernatural entities very regularly, and they either try to interrogate it or smash it. Those are their 2 main ways of interaction. Crane clan are more calculating, so they try to cut a deal if they see a spirit or a yokai, as long as they can get some kind of advantage about it. The Dragon clan are pretty secluded in the mountains, and they're not unused to seeing yokai, so they tend to be kind of cautious around the supernatural, but they tend to understand that most creatures that they encounter desire something. So they try to live in harmony with these beings and give them what they want, and just, minimize the amount of trouble they encounter. The Lion clan's armies, they're very militaristic, very militarized in general. They've encountered all kinds of supernatural things when marching across to their next fight, and generally their approach is the same to spirits as it would be to anything else. They just, slash it and ask questions later. The Phoenix clan are the most spiritually adept in the Emerald Empire, it says here. So nearly every Phoenix clan member knows that the world is filled with all manner of supernatural entities, and they usually try and study and learn about it rather than approaching it with blind force. The Scorpions, so they're sneaky and backstabby side of things, not quite so so noble in court as the crane. They're more sneaking behind in the background, but similarly to the crane, they don't like to deliberately anger or attack the supernatural. They try to get some kind of advantage out of it. They may even be good friends with certain yokai, particularly if they are capable of appearing human, because they might use them as handy spies. Quite useful. The Unicorn Clan, lastly, they see spirits and the supernatural as entities not unlike humans. So they have wants, desires, motivations. They can be good or evil or somewhere in between. And that's part of their kind of worldliness, right? The Unicorn Clan disappeared for a long time. They learn from other cultures, and they're aware of what it feels like to come back to somewhere and feel like an outsider. So they have a certain amount of compassion for these creatures, actually, which I think is kind of nice. And so there's various theories then they go into about, how these changes in elemental imbalance have come about, and the overall theories about why they're occurring. So there's a prevailing theory about the displacement of elemental spirits. So kami who are enshrined to one place but then dislocated to another, bringing an elemental phenomenon with them. So that is blamed for natural disasters and stuff. Some within the Phoenix Clan suggest the unique practice of the Unicorn Clan, known as Mei Shodo, are responsible for the majority of these displacements. So this art originates from foreign nations where spirits are often seen to be in opposition to humankind, places where ghosts are commonly hostile beings. So it follows that the sorcerers of these nations developed arts for imprisoning spirits within talismans and using them for their own reckless needs. And so the Phoenix opposed this practice, and they think that the Unicorn adopting some of these practices may have sort of pissed off the kami and led to some other problem. Then there are the Asako family. Their leading philosophers in Shugenja hypothesize that human beings are the ultimate cause of elemental chaos, so the way that we thoughtlessly interact and utilize the elements and resources of the world is causing disharmony, has been slowly warping and wearing away at the balance over generations. So climate change metaphor much? Then there are traditionalists who disbelieve this. There's a very different ways of viewing it, and this leads to some nice example of an adventure seed that's based on elemental imbalance, and another that's kind of following up on the displacement of kami theory, kind of. But it mentions as well that it's kind of only becoming known, I guess, recently in the storyline of the Emerald Empire here, that these unexplained reports of various problems in different clan territories might be linked together. Most people think it's an isolated bad winter or rough harvest or whatever, but a scattered few are paying attention. Generational priest families and shrine attendants can tell when the enshrined kami are acting oddly. Some Shugenja suspect something is amiss. Astrologers and diviners are trained to notice the signs, and they take note of an unusually high incidence of omens that are contradictory and not easily interpreted. Some of these phenomena, therefore, might be linked together. Some might be truly local. It's hard to know for sure. Even if most people haven't realized quite yet that these imbalances are happening, that won't be the truth for much longer. So they're really setting the scene in this book, in the early part, for this elemental imbalance being the source of perhaps some interesting storylines. There is an adventure that goes with this book, but unfortunately it is in PDF form only. I haven't looked at it yet. They did do previous adventures tied in with the other supplements that were in print form. I'm looking to pick those up and show those off at some point later, but this one is going to be never in print form, which I think is unfortunate. But hey, what can you do? Now we get to a really important section of the book. This is about Shinomen Mori. It's a sprawling sea of trees that stretches across the border of 5 clans, and it's the largest and most ancient fortress in Rokugan. It spans many ecosystems and is home to countless mysterious denizens, including numerous plant and animal species that human eyes have never beheld. It has some of the oldest trees in the empire and perhaps the world, while the deepest copses are said to be the domain of Senkyo itself. Indeed, some say that anything which can be found in nature one can find within Shinomen. But then it goes on to tell you that tales of a haunted malicious wood that consumes anyone who enters are as ancient and well known as the forest itself. And there's also a sidebar here about one of the most infamous and largest bandit gangs in the empire, the Forest Killers. So they have a hidden stronghold in the Shinomen, and they train relentlessly in all manner of ambush tactics. So they're yet another danger to encounter when you're trying to travel around these woods. The woods themselves have strange properties, so they kind of defy the laws of nature in certain ways. Trees grow bigger than they should do. If you cut down vegetation, it'll grow back overnight, almost instantaneously. There's parts so teeming with life that the sounds of birds and insects are kind of overwhelming. There are kind of animal denizens that seem to be more intelligent than you would find elsewhere. They use the example of deer antlers growing in unusual shapes and their coats with odd colors and patterns. Many of these may actually be shapeshifting yokai or other spirits. Locals regard hunting Shinomen game to be the surest way to invite calamity. So also, it's the duty of local Shugenja to go and note trees that are known to be home to Kodama nature spirits, because if you cut those down, bad things will happen as well. Then they go into some key locations within the Shinomen Mori, the forest. So we have the Lake of Cherry Blossoms Snow, the southernmost lake, named for the sakura trees that line its shores. There's villages that cluster around its banks, but they don't dare to expand any further north than the edge of the lake. They don't want to get into the forest itself. There are the Gates of Persistence, carved from a single boulder and laboriously dragged to the southern border of the forest. The Gates of Persistence are a lone torii archway standing above a short path eager eagerly gobbled up by the woods. When crab samurai must enter the Shinomen forest, they must do so through this archway, lest they disrespect the memory of Sudaro and risk the ire of the woods. So Sudaro was the creator of this gateway. Then we have the Shadowlands marshes, which are really grim. These are corrupted marshes thought to be the site of an old battle. So there's remains of a twisted army, one whose origins can be traced back into the Shadowlands. They partially sunken in the muck. The spirits of these tainted beings still writhe in the mud, and orbs of red fire often rise from the mangroves and decaying cypress. It is even said that the trees here will bleed human blood if chopped. So that sounds quite scary. Winding north to south in a cascade throughout the Shinomen is the River of the Sky, which is perhaps the only reliable path through the forest. You will often find natural-looking paths, but locals will tell you never to follow them because they're usually set up by yokai or trying to trick you in some way. So this river wends its way through the forest north to south and then eventually empties into the Lake of Cherry Blossom Snow, which is what we saw up here. The folklore says that the river is fed by Tengoku, or by heaven itself, and that at the mouth of the river one might find a path directly into the heavenly realms. Interesting story hook there, perhaps. Of course, we have some nice Shinomen rumors, no shortage of that, giving its notorious reputation. And then we get into some natural denizens of the area. So this is where we have the story of the trickster Kawauso, the shape-shifting otters. They are kind of curious and playful and fascinated by humans, and it says they seemingly live to test the limits of their patience. So not necessarily evil, they're just annoying. And then you have Koomori, which are bat spirits. So these are shape-shifting bats. They're quite common in the Twilight Mountains of southern Rokugan, as well as the islands of Silk and Spice. But they also exist within the Shinomen Mori. Stories say that if you're lost in the forest and come upon a bat, you can trust that the bat will lead you to safety. While they come from the domain of Senkyo like other animal spirits, they are associated with Yumedo, the realm of dreams, and it is thought they have the power to traverse that ever-shifting realm. They rarely adopt human form, but when they do, it is often to warn trespassers of danger. So these are actually quite kind spirits. Then you have the Kodama, the spirits of the trees. If you travel along the perimeter of the forest, you'll notice that most ancient trees are marked with lengths of rope around the trunk, or paper streamers and bells. A few may even feature a stone tablet, which declares the tree to be home of a nature spirit known as Kodama. These spirits are thought to be the living will of the tree. So it's the duty of Shugenja to identify and mark these, as I mentioned before. So if you cut down a Kodama's home, you'll suffer a great misfortune, so don't do that. Kodama are normally invisible, but they may manifest subtly through a gentle breeze or an echo through the trees. Sometimes they may show up as glowing orbs or wisps, or even as a human being. Then we have Onikuma, which means demon bears. They're the largest predator of the forest. They're several times larger than a typical bear, and they can walk on their hind legs and are able to carry off cattle, horses, and even boulders one-handed. And although they're called Onikuma, they're not actually related to Oni, like demons from the Shadowlands, and they're not demons at all. But they are massive and incredibly strong, so they're very, very dangerous. Then we get into one of the new species in the game that you can play. This is the tattered-eared Nezumi. So the general guide to Nezumi is in the Shadowlands book, The Essential Guide to the Dominion of Fulang, which unfortunately is out of print, and I can't find a copy for love nor money anywhere in the world at present. It is supposed to be reprinted. I've got several websites on alert to email me when they have it. It's got a lot of great nemesis for players to fight in there and cool, scary stuff. So clearly people don't want to get rid of it, but I would really like a copy. So if anybody knows where I can find one, do let me know. But anyway, Nezumi are basically rat-human hybrids of a sort, and there's a tribe of them called the Tattered Ear that live within the Shinomen forest at the base of a tree they call the Great Home. And there's a bit about their history and culture. So they are more likely to trust outsiders and seek help from beyond their warrens. They're a bit more open and outgoing than other Nezumi tribes. They even maintain small libraries where they store like cultural artifacts and study Rokugani languages so they can communicate better with visitors. But they are especially reliant on a group of people in their tribe called the Rememberers. So these are the people whose task it is to recall the safe passages between glens, which water sources are safe, where food can be gathered without supernatural retribution, and how to avoid the hazards of the forest. Much of this knowledge was gathered through trial and error, so that must have been quite dangerous and unfortunate for those people. But yeah, so the elder of the Tattered Ear is a dreamer called the Listener, who lives in the boughs of the Great Home. He is the inheritor of the memories kept by the one who first communed with the spirits of the tree. So yeah, there's later in the book you'll find you can play as one of these tattered-eared Nezumi. Since they're a little bit more sociable, they might actually join a band of wandering Rokugani samurai who are wandering through the forest if they judge them to be worthy. And then next we get to the Shinomen Naga. So the Naga are snake people, basically. Very few people know they exist at all because they've been very deep in the heart of the Shinomen forest for many generations, hundreds of years, and they've been asleep, basically. And these secret guardians, hidden from the eyes of mankind, are starting to awaken. They don't yet know why, but they collectively feel the pull of a great destiny that awaits them beyond the woods. The dream is broken, and at last the Naga prepare to rejoin the world outside. So they are human from the torso up, and they've got a massive serpent's tail instead of a lower torso and legs. Their culture is actually really interesting. There's a nice adventure seat here. Shinomen as well, just with a little bit of the forest killers mixed in there as well. So there's some stuff about their physiology. So because of their serpent kin, they're very lithe and they're very long. So they're roughly 15 feet from head to tail, and if they rise to balance on their tail, then they're about 8 feet tall, so they're massive. Some can grow as long as 20 feet, so they tower over even the tallest human. And they also have a really strong tail as well, so they can break thick logs or trees, and they can squeeze the breath out of their prey. And they have fangs, but they're not venomous. And they reproduce by laying eggs, and that has resulted in kind of a communal culture. So they lay their eggs in large caches together, and after the first molting, the first shed skin is often cured and kept as a memento from one's youth. The ninth molting is important because it marks the beginning of adulthood and one's path through life. It is relatively common for Naga to change their physical sex, sometimes multiple times, which is also accompanied by the shedding of one's skin and the embrace of a new name. The Naga describe males as Naga and females as Nagi, which naturally switches as the Naga change physical characteristics. So they build their cities partially underwater because they're very good at swimming, and they don't really adorn themselves with clothing in the human sense, but they do like to wear trinkets, jewels, and intricate segmented coverings made from seashells, coral, and worked metal. They also have a certain sixth sense that they call the unity. It's often misinterpreted as some kind of communal mind space, but it's not really that. It's just the innate ability to speak to one another through their thoughts, even across long distances. The ability starts out very weak, but it can be trained over their lifetime and built up like a muscle. So masters of this unity, they can communicate over huge distances, project a sort of etheric image of themselves, or even directly transfer constructed memories. It requires a great deal of concentration and mental preparation though, and it can be quite physically taxing. They need to sort of meditate and go within themselves to do it. But it's part of what's made their culture such a communal state. They think of themselves as a unity, and it's an ability unique to the Naga people. It's not possible for human beings to learn it. And something else that is unique to the Naga is their language, which includes things like pheromones and stuff, which humans can't replicate, but they are able to speak Rokugani languages, so that's helpful. Naga can also disguise themselves as humans by using their mental abilities, so they kind of effectively project an image, which is a combination of pheromones and yumeji, bending light, and befuddling the senses to appear as an ordinary human being. They refer to this process as charming. Only those trained in the unity can achieve it reliably. The illusion can be as complex as you want, but for each individual disguise that they adopt, it takes a lot of practice. And the disguise doesn't always work, so some people can see through it if they have sufficient training, basically. So twists of fate unfortunately have robbed the Shinomen Naga of much of their history, so they only have vague recollections and shared stories about what happened to them. But they did know that the Shinomen was once far larger than it is now, and connected to the vast jungles and swamps in what has become the Ivory Kingdoms. And then a comet fell from the sky, blighting the southern lands and creating a corruptive force that shifted the climate and split the vast Naga civilization in two. So the Shinomen Naga found themselves assaulted by twisted creatures and invisible enemies, minions of the blight itself, and they called this enemy the Foul. So one day, they fought against the Foul until one day the blight mysteriously stopped, and the Naga realized their enemy had been defeated, at least for a time. So they withdrew to the forest to rebuild, and then they sort of entered a long slumber, and nobody really knows why. But now they're finally truly awakening. More and more every day are springing to life. Their eggs are hatching. Scholars don't know why it is, nor why they fell asleep in the first place. The Naga have vague dreams from when they slept, flashes of events, but nobody can really put the pieces together. So there you go. So there's a lot of interesting tidbits attached to the Naga. I think it'd be very interesting to have in a human party, and maybe, go on a journey to try and understand what the hell they went through all that time ago to go into this long slumber and how they defeated the Foul. What the Foul was. Is it connected to the Shadowlands? I mean, what is it? And what was the role of humankind in all this, So here we go into their culture. They are quite different than the Naga peoples of the Ivory Kingdom, which they split into after that big comet fell. So they have moral virtues of self-control, truth, and community. Naga philosophers love to contemplate and argue interpretations of these virtues or propose different systems altogether. And they argue in public spaces dedicated for this purpose, a bit like sort of ancient Greeks, I guess. They also love the connection to water. So they do have structures that jut out of the ground, but the majority of their cities are underground in subterranean caverns or beneath the waters, and they virtually have no conception of privacy. They don't have any particular drive for solitude either. They're born in large egg clutches and remain bonded to their den mates throughout their lives, and they're almost never alone. They eat together, they sleep together, they spend time together, they even sleep in clumps to preserve body heat. Their word for cold and alone are the same. A Naga who craves solitude is considered eccentric or strange, and a child who desires to be alone is a cause for concern. So again, loads of interesting stuff about culture. They have advanced engineering and architectural knowledge. They're expert bridge builders. They've got this totally different, totally communal culture together with this telepathic ability. I really like the stuff about Naga here. And there's interesting details even about their martial arts. So because they have a unique physiology, they don't fight in the same way as humans. They use their massive tails. They tower over their human opponents when they're fighting humans. So they tend to use vertical strikes to great effect. Their organs are not in the same place as ours, so what we consider a killing strike is usually not so much for them. They like to focus on fighting with polearms, archery, and teamwork, and they also have an entire martial art devoted to fighting within the water, which is pretty cool. They use piercing weaponry, raking close combat weapons, nets, ropes, and their own natural defenses. So underwater fighters must also contend with opponents from all directions. It's three-dimensional space, right? A fact that the Naga aquatic fighting style exploits to great effect. And some extremely skilled Naga can use the unity to even augment their tactics. How cool is that? So there's also some stuff about their religious practices. They worship local Kodama and nature spirits, basically. The great enemy of their existence is the Foul, which is that polluting invader that came from without, and something they are still concerned about. They're trying to determine which actions they can do will have the greatest impact for good and the least likelihood of the return of this horrible bad spirit. While they've been asleep all this time, obviously the outside world has changed a lot, so there's a bit here about, the debate within Naga civilization and the Shinomen about whether to reveal themselves. The text kind of concludes that the crab would particularly like to get to know these Naga because they're great fighters, and with their success against the Foul, they certainly would do well fighting against the evils of the Shadowlands. The exchange of philosophic ideas could enrich both peoples, possibly even uniting them as it did in the Ivory Kingdoms. Whether or not this outcome is realistic or merely the dreams of hopeless optimists has yet to be written. Another campaign hook there for you. Next, we get into the Asawa Mori. This is another forest. It's not as famous as the Shinomen, doesn't have as many legends around it, but it is the second largest forest in the Empire and very biologically varied. It doesn't have the reputation of the Shinomen, but it's still not a place to be traveled lightly. The woods are filled with scattered shrines, local kami and guardian spirits, often with little villages nearby, with their inhabitants devoted to the upkeep of the shrine, or devoted to cottage industries diligently working beneath the forest boughs. A network of pathways between villages winds through the forest, but most are hidden by clever kami in exchange for daily offerings. Most travelers stick to the lone roads connecting Kyuden Isawa to Kyuden Osaka to the south, and Pale Oak Castle to the north. So this is kind of, the Asawa woodlands dominate the provinces of this family, contributing to the Asawa family's relative isolation. It's also regarded as an important place for study. The woodlands are colloquially regarded as the Asawa school grounds, and at any time the woods may be populated with dozens of teachers and 3 times as many students. Within the Asawa woodlands is a place avoided even by the most experienced Shugenja, the Kuroi Mori. This is the dark wood, that's what that means. So it's a copse of black bark trees and lightless canopy that radiates from a dilapidated manor of forgotten ancestry. Those who step within may be assailed by terrible, maddening visions. These illusions are caused by traumatized kami who have grown to hate humanity for some unknown reason. So that could be an interesting place to visit for the more adventurous of the campaigners in this game. Then it talks about some of the natural denizens. So there are plenty of natural species here, tend to grow a bit larger than typical. So there's deer, pheasants, geese, foxes, and a species of pika known as crying rabbits. They also have some brown bears, wild dogs, known as silver dogs for their unusual white coats, and they are friendly but willful, resistant to training. Then there is the pretty creepy snow maiden. So in the higher elevations of the northern Asawa woodlands, there's year-round icy conditions, and travelers may spot from a distance a lone woman in a pale kimono, untouched by the cold, voice raised in sad song, seemingly lost or wandering. It is advised to leave this one alone. Although rarely malicious, it is unwise to consort with the wintry spirits known as snow maidens. Some believe they are the ghosts of human beings who died in the snowdrifts. Shugenja postulate that they're a type of kami, acquiring an identity and form over time in proximity to a vessel. The truth may never be known. Although they're rarely malicious, they're dangerous nonetheless, for they're always surrounded by frigid cold and snowy conditions. When angered, these snowfalls grow into blizzards that can sap the warmth of anyone caught within them. Yet stories of friendly snow maidens who came to the aid of lost travelers abound. It is believed that entire communities may exist within the woodlands, and sightings grow frequent each winter as the snowbanks spread throughout the Phoenix Lands. So common are they that it is common for unmarried women to purposefully sit as close to the hearth as possible so as to prove they're not snow maidens in disguise. I like that little detail. So then along the northern border, nobody can really say honestly where the northern border of Rokugan begins. Some maps put it at the feet of the northern mountain range. However, the majority of imperial cartographers define the border as the Great Wall of the North, which is a sprawling range of icy peaks and hilly alpine tundra. This is a dangerous area through here. There's cascading rapids, winding their way into the lands of the Phoenix. The most populated expanse in the north belongs to the Dragon Clan. That's where much of their territory is. To the west, the northern border flattens somewhat, yielding to elevated flats and shrublands. And here, the border is guarded by the Badger Clan. Then we have some further details about locations within the northern border. So the Sorrow's Path, when you are considered to be an odious traitor, you're banished from the Empire down the Sorrow's Path, heavily guarded northern passage, and it's a really bad experience, basically. The furthest outpost is carved into the side of the second largest mountain in Rokugan, and is among the most remote outposts of the Dragon. Its existence is virtually unknown, as is its purpose. A staircase leads to an ancient vault that is sealed with a massive puzzle box lock said to be designed by Togashi himself. The answer to this puzzle, known known as the last riddle is the only way to open the vault. No one knows what the vault contains, no one except perhaps the dragon champion himself. So there you go. Then you have the massive Sachiko Tower to the northernmost point of Dragon Clan territory, which caps the top of a massive snowy mountain. Then you have the active volcano known as the Wrath of the Kami. And then you have the Yobanjin Mura. So this is a difficult village to accidentally stumble upon. It's in the foothills of the northern mountains just within the border of Isawa territory. It's a unique trade village frequented by passing Yobanjin tribes who seek to trade with Rokugani. Technically, such contact is a violation of imperial decree, but this fact is overlooked in this village. And the importance of this trade village makes it one of the safest locations on the northern border and the starting point for many eastern excursions beyond the empire. So the Yobanjin were the people who basically refused to bend to the emperor's rule, and that's what their name actually means. It means something like refused to bow. So these are various mixed different cultures who defiantly exist outside the realms of the Hante Emperor. So the descendants of these people were pushed out from the borders of the Emerald Empire, so they're spread in the northern mountains and hid in isolated pockets throughout the wilds, so they try to continue their way of life as much as they can. There's a nice little side box here about imperialism. It's a clear theme with these Yobanjin tribes and civilizations that they were pushed out by the conquering aspect of the Emerald Empire, so just, be careful when using this theme in your game, which is sound advice, I would say. And then we get into some of the details, their relations with Rokugan, so direct contact with Yobanjin is kind of expressly forbidden by imperial decree, but as in that Yobanjin Mura, we see that there are exceptions to every rule, and there are some tribes that have become large and influential, and so they have actually some representation in Rokugan, ambassadors of their own, and even diplomats that they send to the imperial cities. Usually they are met by the Tortoise or Badger clans, but sometimes they may be entrusted to another, especially one who sponsors the diplomat. The Unicorn and Dragon Clan both have been known to do this, escorting the ambassadors of specific Yobanjin tribes for mutually beneficial reasons. Contact with outsiders is also forbidden by decree, but anyone stationed near Rokugan's borders will attest that this edict is routinely ignored, of course. And then we have some details about the different tribes of the Yobanjin. So we have the Hyoketsu, one of the largest, strongest, and most independent of the northern Yobanjin tribes. Their traditions live on in the Kaito family of the Phoenix clan. Their descendants in the Kaito still enjoy good relations with most of the free tribes nearby. The fate of the Hyoketsu is used to temper the ambitions of would-be warlords among the tribes. So again, some history of the Hyoketsu, some of their traditions. So they worship the fortunes and they worship the kami, but they didn't feel that there needed to be a kind of really complex ritualistic approach to this. They viewed the spirits and the elements as sort of interrelated, beautiful, and if we actually spent a lot of time worshiping them in ritualistic ways, it would take away from the beauty of simplicity. Simple acts like archery, chief among their high arts, was elevated to religious significance. So they did things like archery and hunting to venerate the natural world, rather than the kind of organized religious ways that you might find in the Emerald Empire. Then we get into the Kogarashi and the woolen hooves. We actually see back here, a little tiny adorable horse there. So they're known as the woolen hooves due to their funny little ponies that they have, basically. So among the wide plateaus in the high mountains, there are herds of woolly mountain ponies. Their thick curly hair has adapted these ponies to the elevated cold climate, and these are the herds of the woolen hooves people who take their name from the unique steeds. So they thrived in the foothills and plains for centuries. As the Emerald Empire expanded, they found their hunting grounds turning into farmlands and villages, so they moved further out and further north. Since then, they've kept mostly to the northern territories and relatively little contact with the Empire. Now and again, a brave explorer will venture south into Rokugan to see how far they can get without being detected. And they've sometimes come to blows with Unicorn or Badger samurai. They're very good at horse archery, so that has proven to frustrate the Rokugani samurai, but these were never prolonged battles, and the woolen hooves have no desire to take on the Empire at a large scale. They don't consider the Rokugani enemies, in fact. They've been known to trade with the Unicorn at Kanbulak, but they are enemies of the Ujiga Raiders, with whom they clash frequently. So they have their own set of traditions as well. So, of course, they're a tradition of nomadic horse archery. So a little bit of kind of Mongolian steppes sort of influence being felt there. Traditional garb, in fact, incorporates arrows into their clothing. And their proudest tradition is their unique style of horse archery, which is traced back to their ancestors. To graduate to adulthood within the tribe, you must demonstrate the ability to successfully fire arrows at targets from the back of a galloping pony without losing control of the steed. They're also known for their pony racing festival, a spectacle that attracts other Yobanjin tribes, either to watch or to participate themselves. So families bet on each other's herds, and it's a big celebration. Then we get into the Seikitsu Yobanjin. So not all of the Yobanjin tribes joined the northern migration. Many simply pulled into the regions where it was difficult to follow. So these are sort of groups that kind of blended into remote areas of the world, rather than completely disappearing across the boundaries of the northern mountains. There's a place called Tengu's Overlook and the Laughing Mountain Tribe. So travelers who seek a pass through the spine of the world mountains sometimes report a phenomenon called Yamabiko, or mountain echo. It's described described as a voice or laughter cascading across the cliffs, seemingly without origin as if rising from the mountains themselves. It's said to be the voice of nature or trickster spirits, but the true origin is far less supernatural. On clear days, the sound of a hidden settlement can travel for miles, so it is said that the city of Tengu's overlook has yet to be uncovered, despite the sounds of its denizens carrying over the mountaintops. It is also why the people of the city call themselves the Laughing Mountain. They were seeking refuge from the fledgling lion clan, congregated at the foothills of the spine of the world, and then withdrew into the forests and away from the followers of Akodo. But soon they became lost, the mountains got higher, the hazards grew worse, but they continued upwards, praying they wouldn't freeze or starve. Then they eventually found a guide who helped them find a safe place and revealed his true nature as one of the bird-like Tengu. So life among the Laughing Mountain people, they considered the range of the southern spine of the world to be their domain. The central city, Tengu's overlook, is surrounded by hidden tiered orchards and farmlands which are maintained by slash-and-burn agriculture. The descendants of the city founders are the de facto rulers of the Laughing Mountain people, but in practice, the people tend to govern themselves communally. And then we have the Tengu themselves, again, who are playable in this supplement. So they're a race of winged, bird-like humanoids who live on the distant peaks of the northern mountains. Born in the bracing extremes of the mountain climate, they are constantly in search of a deeper understanding of the world and its inhabitants, and of the best way to coexist peacefully with the din and tumult of nature. Their asceticism has led to strange myths and legends. A few ever glimpse the Tengu, and those who do may not even know it, because they can fly, right, so they can get away quickly, but also they're able to blend in. They're masters of the art of illusion. There are Tengu who live and die observing the humans of Rokugan without ever being found, seemingly able to blend in as naturally socially as they do physically. So all Tengu are feathered tall hominids with great wings, taloned hands, and an avian head. They do not share a unified appearance. Those who live in the northern mountains tend to be large, with muted colors, long bodies, and a wide wingspan. Most don't favor heavy armor or large weapons, for obvious reasons, because they like to fly. They often dress in light, modest clothing, devoid of markings or bright colors. They can live to be centuries old, but those who grow sick or die do not often protest. Death is accepted, or even welcomed as part of the natural order of life. For the Tengu, the body is an outward expression of the inward self. Injury and sickness arise from internal imbalance. Therefore, meditation and spiritual healing are the first steps one must take toward restoration. So millennia of spiritual development have given Tengu a preternatural sense for the delicate balance of nature. So the following are two particular abilities the Tengu are known to possess. Illusory glamours, called masks of air, allow Tengu to walk amongst the people of Rokugan unnoticed. In order to assume human form, one must recite an ancient incantation while donning a particular piece of human clothing. The resultant illusion casts a veil over the reciter that makes him appear and sound human for all intents and purposes. The illusion fades when the specific piece of clothing is removed. Then we have spiritual projection, so Tengu can travel far and wide while in a deep state of meditation. It's kind of like an astral projection. This method of travel allows them to see distant happenings throughout Rokugan, all from a bird's eye view. By slipping into a deep state of meditation, the Tengu spirit takes flight on otherworldly currents. The body becomes still and the pulse slows, and the projector appears by all accounts to be dead. If the Tengu spends too much time outside of their body, they may not be able to return to it, doomed to eternally wander. These wayward Tengu spirits are likely the cause of many disturbing legends. Then immediately some details of the legends of the Tengu and the life of the Tengu. Much as with birds, Tengu society is comprised of unique social strata. Young Tengu are not raised in nuclear families so much as they are co-raised by singles, pairs, or groups of parents who take turns nurturing and teaching the young according to their talents. An elder, often but not always the oldest Tengu in the area, presides over a congress of adults to decide migration, building, and other consequential decisions. And one of their great proverbs is, "All things die, but the sky is eternal." And their beliefs are not prescriptive, so they have a relatively free sense of how one might live life. One's role in society may be ever-changing, but a Tengu area is run much like a monastery, with set schedules, rituals, and meditation at the heart of daily living. So they're highly spiritual beings as well, as we can see. Meditation and music are two of the foremost expressions of a Tengu's pursuit of enlightenment. And of course, you can play a Tengu. Hooray! So they're motivated by a desire to understand the world around them in service of pursuing spiritual and intellectual enlightenment. Whether this desire for enlightenment is one's ninjo, giri, or destiny may determine a number of unique role-playing moments. Is the character drawn by curiosity or driven by the society's need to understand? And now, after introducing all these cool new species, we get back to the de facto leaders of the northern reaches of Rokugan, the rugged northern reaches, which is the Dragon Clan. So we get a lot of history here about Togashi and Shinsei, which I won't bore you with too many of the details. Instead, we'll go into the lands of the Dragon Clan. You can see there's a lovely map here as usual. You can see all the key castles, villages, and cities are marked out. You can see the rugged nature of the terrain. It's pretty much surrounded and filled with mountains. Right here is the active volcano, the Wrath of the Kami. Yeah, and then we have kind of the mountains at the edge of the world there, marking the border of the empire. So you can see why a lot of people don't visit the dragons, and they're fairly mysterious. It's not an easy place to get to. Getting into the mountains is a tough job, and all the main pathways in are heavily guarded by dragons or by badgers or by both. So they talk a bit about the details. So the Wild North, the vast majority of this region is virtually inaccessible. That's why we get some Yobanjin groups up there. These lands are mainly given to the stewardship of the Togashi and Agasha families, the former maintaining only a few isolated holdings, mostly secluded shrines and temples. The lands of the Agasha are somewhat better developed, but are still wild and primitive compared to most of the empire. Then we have the tame south. They say tame is sort of somewhat of an overstatement, but it's certainly more civilized than the rough wild north. So in the southern part of this territory, we have the Mirumoto and Kitsuki families. The latter oversee the flattest and most fertile lands, which represent the bulk of the dragon's arable territory. And here's where they conduct most of their commercial and political interactions with the rest of the empire. The Tombo, or Dragonfly clan, acts as gatekeepers for the dragon, a tradition that dates back to that minor clan's formation by samurai of the Dragon and Phoenix clans. Visitors who are approved by the Dragonfly and by the dragon delegation permanently located at Kyuden Tombo are then guided northward, normally to Shirokitsuki. So let's see, Kyuden Tombo is way down here. So you would meet some dragonfly there, and if you are approved and by the dragon delegation as well, then you should be led north to Shirokitsuki, which is Last Step Castle, and then you're getting into proper dragon territory. It gets wild and mountainy. So then we get some of the details of the families of the Dragon Clan. So we have the Togashi family. They're known for their tattooed monks and their use of kiho. As a result, their culture is very ascetic and they endure and embrace hardship and privation. Then we have some details about the lands of the Togashi, where we have the High House of Light, the primary holding. It's perched on a mountainside and reachable only by ascending an obscure path of 1,000 steps. Probably the most prominent temple in the Dragon lands. Then we have the Fukuro Kujin Seido, the shrine to the Fortune of Wisdom, is likely the least resplendent shrine to a great fortune in the empire. It's also the largest devoted to Fukuro Kujin. While the journey to this shrine is strenuous, it is likely the most readily accessible holding in the Togashi lands, being served by a reasonably traversable road. Then we have the Refuge of the Three Sisters, located in the mountains known as the Dragon's Teeth, a shrine devoted to Onatangu, Lord Moon. Visitors here must brave an extremely difficult and dangerous ascent along a narrow switchback path known as the Climb to the Moon. And then we have an interesting stat block here for an NPC, Togashi Renmu, Sociable Wanderer. So he's an adversary. He's got a 4 in Wind and Void, and 3s in the other stats. Decent honor and glory at 1672. He's a scholar, is his main higher purpose, but he's also conciliatory. He's not great at argumentation, perhaps. He's equipped with a bow staff, and he is able to use the Blood of the Kami ability. So when he uses a kiho, they're considered to have 3 bonus successes. And then he has Drawing from Within, so he can choose 4 kiho from the core rulebook, and these will be linked to an appropriate tattoo on his body, so they benefit from this 3 bonus successes every single time. So not one to mess with without thinking through it clearly. Then we got the Mirumoto. They are best summed up as pragmatically martial. Mirumoto himself was first and foremost a warrior, and he imparted a warlike culture to the family he founded. Ever pragmatic, they apply the general dragon belief that each mortal's path through life is their own walk. The Mirumoto revere both Shinsei and the fortunes in a manner similar to other Rokugani, but their tolerance extends even further. As long as they are not blasphemous or heretical, the Mirumoto would generally accept the beliefs of others as they stand, even if they would be in other parts of the empire considered unusual or even outlandish. Fairly open-minded peoples. Their lands of the Mirumoto include Last Glance Castle, which we saw on the map before, a stark and functional fortress built into the side of a mountain overlooking a steep winding road. They also have a Heibesu, located on the eastern margin of the Dragon lands, on the edge of the Dragonheart Plain, and is the major commercial hub for the Dragon. This is where they conduct most of the trade with the Eastern Empire, particularly the Phoenix and the Crane. And then we have the Iron Mountain Dojo. So this is the training academy for most Dragon Bushi, and is considered the center of excellence for training, study, and refinement of the Niten style of dueling. Coincidentally, we have a stat block for Mirumoto Kichiru, Thwarted Duelist. He's another tough guy. Adversary, conflict rating of 5, 80 glory, and he's got a 5 in fire. He's got duelist instincts, but also arrogance. He wields the daisho, both the katana and the wakizashi. He's got lacquered armor with physical protection of 4, pretty intense. And he uses 2 heaven style. So when performing an attack action, he may spend opportunity to perform a strike action with a ready weapon she has not used for an attack action this turn. So she can double strike you. Then we have the Agasha family. They are particularly attuned to the elements. Virtually all Dragon Shugenja are from the Agasha family. So their culture and tradition is about scholarship, particularly of the elements, and they share the role of archivists and historians within the family as well. And the primary concern of the Agasha at the moment is the elemental imbalance. Not only does it affect the communion of Shugenja with the elemental spirits, it has resulted in unpredictability creeping into alchemical practices. So there you go, tying into the elemental imbalance theme again. So their lands include Shiro Agasha, so they would have to get a guide and a reason for visiting the Agasha Castle. Anyone not properly guided can certainly get close and see it looming on the peak of a dormant volcano known as Firetooth Mountain, but they would remain unable to find a way in. In fact, the entrance is a twisting maze of tunnels riddling the mountain beneath it. So that's kind of in the old style of Japanese castles, where the castle itself was not so tough, but actually finding a way in was very tough. And there's also the Cave of Crystal, a stunning cave lined with thousands upon thousands of clear and translucent crystals, ranging from the size of a man's finger to as long as 5 horses standing nose to tail. It is said that earth invocations and rituals performed in the cave are greatly magnified in their effects. Then we have the Serpent's Tail Mine. So 2 rich veins of ore, one of gold and one of iron, twist and ride through the mountain, being essentially braided together. It is believed these are the tracks left in the rock of 2 powerful spirits, one of fire, representing the gold, and one of earth, representing the iron, who escaped from the massive volcano known as the Wrath of the Kami. And then we have a stat block for Agasha Shinji, a zealous naturalist. So they're a bit less of a threatening type, more of a scholarly type, but they are a Shugenja as well, so watch out for their Yumi, which is a bow, of course. Got a cudgel for close range damage. They have sanctified robes, which protect against supernatural damage, and they can choose 0 to 6 invocations and 0 to 3 rituals Shinji can perform. And if they do so in pristine wilderness, then the TN, the difficulty number for performing that invocation or ritual, is reduced by 1. You'll most often encounter them in the wilderness, so that could be a problem. Then we have the Kitsuki family. So they are the most commonly seen members of the Dragon Clan in other parts of the Empire. Virtually every Dragon delegation contains a substantial contingent of Kitsuki. The fact that many Rokugani find the Kitsuki somewhat off-putting has only proven an advantage in the complex and unforgiving world of imperial politics. So they focus on objective evidence and observation. It is not that Rokugani reject such things, rather they tend to place greater weight on individual testimony, with its truthfulness better defined by the tenets of Bushido. Some complain that the Kitsuki are effectively denigrating the order, a blasphemous concept. But the Kitsuki, their culture is about focusing on the facts and only the facts. They're meticulous and studious. They are generally adherents of Fortunism over Shinseism. Part of their Genpuk ceremony involves making a pilgrimage to Fukurokujin Seido in the Togashi lands and spending 3 days there in contemplation. So they are concerned with the rise of the Pure Land sect and the declining Dragon Clan birth rate. And the lands that they hold are rugged. They include Nanashimura on the southern edge of the Kitsuki lands, an unusual settlement largely administered by Ronin, which is very unusual, of course. Kinai's Strike Village is a small, tidy settlement in the southern Kitsuki lands west of Kyuden Tombo. It exists for one purpose, the training of Kitsuki investigators. And in fact, this is something they're very good at, and that's why they go along with their diplomats and other members of the Dragon Clan when they go down to make dealings with the other parts of the Empire. Then we have Distant Paddy Village, located east of Kyuden Tombo. Distant Paddy Village is located at a major road junction, that of the Imperial Road that leads southward into the lands of the Lion and Totoshi Ranbo. So there's a bustling trade happening in this area, basically. It's at the intersection of 2 major roads. We've got a stat block for Kitsuki Noriko, Conflicted Magistrate. Got a 5 in water, so very clever there. And he's a student of law and a scholar, but he is conflicted a little bit, but still can wield a katana and wakizashi, so watch out for that. Always uses her focus as her base initiative value. That would be 7 there. And she can also, when performing a skill check to investigate, she can use Uncovering the Truth. She can spend opportunity to increase the number of successes on her skill check by 1 per opportunity spent this way. So they really are very good at investigating, these Kitsuki. Then we have some bits about temples and shrines, which are fundamental aspects of Rokugani religious belief. Temples are tended by monastic orders. Monks can worship at them or simply engage in quiet contemplation, but they fill a greater diversity of roles in the empire, so they're places of religious reverence. They're also contemplative places where visitors may spend quiet time seeking to commune with a holy figure or figures to which the temple is devoted. They also put great emphasis on teaching the laity in their community about their holy figures, and some run schools for this purpose. They can also be used as places of refuge when there's a disaster. They also play an important role in the political life of the empire, acting as neutral ground for the conduct of diplomacy, particularly between warring clans. People take the sacredness of these temple grounds seriously. They also tend to maintain libraries of lore, in some cases quite extensive ones. They may also contain shrines housed within temples, so you get mixtures, a bit of syncretism, much like modern Japan and Shinto and Buddhism. The temples of the Dragon Clan are similar to those located elsewhere in the Empire. They are often under the care of monastic orders that themselves are part of the Brotherhood of Shinsei. Those in the Dragonlands are generally not that way. The Togashi family, in its role as monastic order, occupies and oversees most of the temples. So they tend to bring unique character to the temples. They incorporate a number of worshipful and contemplative practices in their observances. They are fond of using koans, riddles, parables, and other such mental devices for their meditations. Then we have one of the most popular and enduring images of a Togashi monk is that of a tattooed figure, clothed only enough to maintain their modesty, standing perched on one foot beneath the icy deluge of a mountain waterfall. This practice, known as misogi, is a form of ritual purification used to prepare the body, mind, and soul to enter the presence of and commune with the divine. Basically, the Togashi came to the northern mountains to reflect on the nature of existence, and so they created the world temple. They take up places of vigil and meditation where they believe the natural and spiritual worlds draw most closely together. So they kind of have this idea that the holy can be found anywhere, and sort of worship and communion with the spiritual and divine can be found in lots of natural settings. Then there's some talk here about the wrath of the kami, which is the massive volcano. The name of the mountain hints at the character of the spirits. Those who come here to seek communion with the kami, some of them do not survive, killed by falling rocks, bursts of super hot and toxic gas, or falls from great heights. Wow. For this reason, no mortal comes here lightly. Well, I should expect not. Then there is a temple, which you can see here next to the exploding deadly volcano. And there is a nice adventure hook about that as well. And then we have Agasha Hayato, the Stoic Guardian, spent many years worshipping the spirits of the wrath of the kami. And in fact, he has a 5 in earth and void, perhaps for that reason, and much lower stats than the other 3 elements. He is a scholar, well equipped with a bow staff. He can use 3 Kiho, and when subjected to any attack or effect that involves fire, he's considered to have resistance to physical 4 and supernatural 4. So he's used to getting burned. I'll leave it that way. Then we have the Furthest Fortress. So this is a cloistered military order of the Togashi monk sect. They adopt a military-like organization and focus the vast majority of their training on martial arts and the use of weapons. Those who make the long, grueling journey to Furthest Fortress, a journey that is only even possible during the warmest months of summer, find themselves confronting a fortified structure that would not seem out of place in the lands of the Crab Clan. And this must be it here, constructed of dour gray stone, it says. And this is where we can find the final riddle of Togashi. Togashi Koma, a militant adept, conflict rank of 6, so he has martial excellence advantage and is uncompromising in social situations. His favored weapons are punching, kicking, nunchucks, and he has 3 abilities. So when Hayato successfully uses a Kiho, she's considered to have 3 bonus successes. She knows Earthen Fist, Air Fist, Flame Fist, and Water Fist, and each of those benefit from the 3 extra successes. And when making a strike action with her nunchucks, Hayato may also attack with a kick or a punch. So they talk about the Mountain Song Temple, and these Agasha scholars studying the Mountain Song, also known as the Voice of the Elements, and have concluded that a particular confluence of winds from the east off the distant sea and from the cold north strike the peaks surrounding, such that they act like the breath blown into a flute. And so you do get an actual sound of song whistling through the mountains. Now we have another stat block here for Kota, Ambitious Agitator. So she visited Mountain Song Temple, but they have an ulterior motive. A well-spoken scholar with a mercurial social nature, equipped with a bow staff, and may take an instigator ability. So once per scene as a support action, Kota may make a TN2 sentiment water check targeting up to 3 characters. If they succeed, they're able to discern potential sources of conflict among them. Each target gains 3 strife, and if they unmask as a result, they must direct their unmasking at another target or targets of Kota's choice. They can really mess up your whole social life there. And then we have a lovely map of Mountain Song Temple, which looks extremely dangerous. Look at all these narrow rope bridges across these chasms here. But they do have a Traveler's Inn, so there is somewhere you can stay if you visit, if you manage to reach it somehow. Various shrines, a small spring for a water source. The monks live over here. We've got the main temple here, some gardens, the abbot's building, and a plot for growing crops so it can be self-sufficient. So a stunningly beautiful scenery, but could die 1,000 different ways before you ever get there. So now, finally, we get to the Dragonfly clan. So there's a history of how they came about from kind of a rise to a minor clan. Isawa Morocco of the Phoenix clan and Akodo Yokutsu, a skilled commander of the Lion clan. And there was a whole sort of love story going on here. And then the young couple received the blessing from Ashijin's lord and Morocco's teacher. They traveled to settle in a small valley. And then blah, 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 lots of things happened. And there was an unexpected show of unity between the dragon and the phoenix. The emperor saw this as an opportunity to unite the two clans. Using this marriage as a symbol, the couple chose the dragonfly as their symbol, and so the dragonfly clan was born. The duty of the dragonfly, despite their tiny size and the small amount of land they cover, they're actually one of the most powerful minor clans because they're the main link between the great clan of the dragon and the rest of Rokugan. So there's an area that dignitaries know as the Halls of Waiting. It's Shirotonbo, the Halls of Waiting. So it's been compared to Meido, which is the colorless gray place where samurai wait for judgment after death. It's not the coolest and most fun place to hang out if you are a samurai looking to get the approval of the dragonfly. They make you wait there and check you out before they let you into the dragonfly approval, and then the dragon contingent's approval, and then into Dragonlance. And we have a nice stat block here for Tombo Sadao, the daimyo of the Dragonfly. So has a 5 in water and some decent ratings in the other elements. Honor and glory and status are all pretty high. Advantages of being tactful socially and steadfast, both martial and social, but also quite rigid socially. Favorite weapon is the Nodachi and Wakazashi. She has the ability of Wings of Calm. Once per scene when making a social check to calm someone down or de-escalate a situation, she may add 3 kept void dice set to opportunity and 2 kept void dice set to success. So that's quite a big bonus. She also has Morocco's Blessing. As a support action, she may make a TN3 courtesy water check targeting any number of characters in the scene. If he succeeds, each target removes up to 3 fatigue plus a number of fatigue equal to his bonus successes. Additionally, every target gains the Thoughtful Arbiter distinction until the end of the scene. That's fascinating. And then we have, of course, the section on how to create your Dragonfly character if you wish to. They gain a bonus to the Earth Ring, +1 to the Sentiment skill, and a status of 30. Of course, what does your character know? They know some things about the relationships between the Phoenix and the Dragon. You know about the lands of the Dragon and the Phoenix as well. And you're comfortable with most mountainous areas. And the most important tenets of Bushido to you are courtesy and duty, which you consider to be linked together. The main family of the Dragonfly, which is a very tiny clan, is just the Tombo family. They get +1 to air and water rings, +1 to courtesy and culture, and they start with a glory of 35 and 1 koku of wealth, along with 2 Dragonfly glass ornaments. They're the descendants of the clan's founders, Ashijin and Morocco, and their first followers. They're close with one another, sharing thoughts, theories, and ideas with one another, with more openness and vigor than most samurai would consider appropriate. And then we have a kind of revised game of 20 questions. And I think this is one of the objections that was had by some people who bought this book, that this revised game of 20 questions is a bit repetitive. But I think it makes sense here because we're talking about entirely different cultures, right? So we're talking about coming from regions, allowing for people to be influenced by the natural environments where they grew up. We're talking about new species being introduced, your upbringing as a craft person, being brought up in a temple, as a hunter or fisherman. You could be from a gaijin culture even. What do they long for? How might their past impact their ninjo? So now we have sample pasts that could affect your ninjo. So maybe you have spiritual troubles or a bad reputation, you have debts to pay, somebody deserted. Then you have the other questions continuing. What does your character think of Bushido? And there's some new sample ninjo. So maybe your desire is to achieve mastery of a skill, to atone for something, to assist the local spirits, to try and become a great master, to kill monsters, regain your home, recover a relic, tame a great beast. Lots of interesting things. And then we have some new paths. So the Dragonfly Grace of the Spirit School. This is a mixture of Courtier and Shugenja. They have the May the Spirit Show the Path school ability. So once per scene, if you would fail a social check, you may immediately make a TN5 theology check, with the TN being reduced by a number equal to your school rank. If you succeed, you may change any kept void dice on that social check to success results instead. The rank 6 ability is Whispers of the Kami. You may spend 1 void point to use your school ability an additional time this scene, and you can do this multiple times. Very cool. And now look at how happy this person looks. They must be from the Woolen Hooves, judging by the dress style. And in fact, they are a Laughing Mountain Hearthstone tradition, nestled deep in the spine of the world. Laughter makes the home as their school ability, so the first time you make a successful social check against another character in the scene, you may reduce the TN of all subsequent social checks against that character by 1 to a minimum of 1 for the remainder of the scene. The effect is not stacked with itself, but can be used on multiple characters. Their rank 6 special ability is the Smiling Mountain tradition, so you may train social skills up to rank 6, paying 12 XP per skill raise from rank 5 to 6 in this way. That's actually one of the few times I can recall seeing an explicit ability that allows you to go to skill rank 6 in something. And this is actually any social skills, so that's pretty dang good. Then we have some new stuff for the Shinomen. The Shinomen Naga Seer tradition, which is Courtier and Bushi together. They can use kata, rituals, and shuji, and their ability is to bend perception. So you determine what illusion your character is perfected with your GM, and your character can seamlessly switch between their true form and this alternate form within a matter of seconds. Anyone witnessing you do so sees something narratively appropriate based on your illusion. Additionally, you can increase the damage dealt by your tail by your school rank. And the rank 6 ability is scaled high. You need to defend against damage. You may treat your physical resistance and supernatural resistance as equal to your rank in fitness. Very cool. Then you have the Nezumi, our friends, the rat people. Their school ability is Keen Senses. When you make a check to perceive and investigate your surroundings, they decrease the TN of that check by a number equal to your school rank. And they have the Kata Razor Bite and starting ninjutsu of Skulk, which I like. The rank 6 ability is Reflective Strike. During a skirmish, if an opponent within range 0 to 1 of you attempts to move away, you may spend 1 void point to immediately make 2 strike actions. Each action is resolved separately. Very handy. Now we got the Tengu as well. You can be Tengu Tengu Mask of Air tradition. So these are the ones that use the Mask of Air to hide amongst the humans, which makes sense to play as a PC character. Their starting techniques include the Kata of Flight, 2 Keyhole, and the ability to use a ritual, and they can also use invocations. Their school ability is the Mind of Calm. You can make a TN6 meditation check to study someone else's technique of a category and rank you have available to you. This check is reduced by your school rank to a minimum of 1. If you succeed, you can replicate that technique until the end of the scene. And their rank 6 ability, you can choose one technique category your school does not already have available to it. That technique type is now available to you. Now we have the Woolen Hooves. There we go. So they can use kata, rituals, and shuji. They have the school ability of Evolution of the Wilds. When you make a check to employ an unconventional solution, subject to GM discretion, reduce the TN of that check by your school rank. Their rank 6 ability is Born to Survive. Once per scene, when you would suffer an amount of damage that would cause you to exceed your endurance threshold, you may instead suffer that amount of strife instead. Now we got some new advantages and some new passions. So you can be knowledgeable wilderness guide, you can be a thoughtful arbiter, you can be a skilled midwife, you can have a passion for charity. I'm not going to go through the details of these because there's loads of text. You can have a passion for the earth. You can have disadvantages like having adversaries. There's some new types here, so you can be an insomniac. You can be out of shape. You can be stalked by a certain type of creature. You can have a fear of common creatures as a new anxiety. You can have a fear of mediocrity. You can have a fear of poison. And then there's some new samurai heritages as well. So you might be at one with nature. You might be tied to the perfect land sect, which would decrease your glory. You could be a medical innovator. You could be a gaijin consort, which would decrease your honor by 2, your glory by 3. But that could help you if you're exploring in the wilds. You could have a revered parent, or you could have a path to enlightenment. So these are new bloodlines, but they can be used even for non-dragon characters who may bear dragon blood because of marriage of members of their clan into the family lineage. Then we've got new techniques, so lots of Kiho for the monks. I've got Earth Kiho, Mercy of the Stone Fortune, Rejuvenating Breath, Shadow of Ancient Peaks, Grace of the Gentle Breeze, Step of the Storm. Let's see what that is. You may make a TN3 fitness air check to suddenly leap away from harm. Once per game session, you may spend 1 void point to perform this check immediately after being declared the target of another character's attack action check. You can use this as an enhancement, and while this Kiho is active, when you are targeted by an attack action check, you may gain 1 fatigue to negate 1 opportunity from the attacker's check. While this Kiho is active at the end of your turn, you must move 1 range band. Or as a burst, if you have 2 or more bonus successes, you may immediately move 2 range bands. Cool. Kiho are cool in that they're really flexible. You know, you have this, you can activate it, you can use it as an enhancement, and then there's a burst effect as well. We've got new Water Kiho, Void Kiho, all the Kiho. Then we have some new kata, so bear swipe style for Bushi and Monk, presumably learned from the wilds. And this is a really good one, actually. If you perform an attack action check and you have 2 extra opportunity, you can choose blading, dazed, disoriented, or prone, and that inflicts that condition on 1 or more targets, and they cannot remove that condition until the end of your next turn. Then you have the Serpent's Twist style, which is for the Naga amongst us. So while you make a fitness check to resist a critical strike caused by another character's attack, that character is at range 0 to 2 of you, you may spend opportunity as follows. The character whose effect you are resisting receive fatigue equal to the number of strife results they kept on their check. Then, if you succeed on your check to resist the effect, you add that many bonus successes to your check. We have Swallow's Dart style, Close Combat style for Polearms, which again is useful for Naga. The Howling Gale Defense, the Heron's Grasp style, so that sounds like a Tengu bonanza there. The Sero's Leap style, Tumbling Oak style. And we have some more non-human kata, so we have Flight, of course, for Tengu. We have the Razor Bite for Naga, Nezumi, or other yokai, so you must be in the correct form to use it. And you treat the deadliness of this weapon as 2 higher per opportunity spent this way, or you can spend 2 opportunity to ignore a number of points of your target's physical resistance up to your ranks in survival, and your target starts to bleed. Or if you succeed and you are a Naga or another creature with a venomous bite, your target suffers the exhausted condition. There's also Owl Swoop style, again useful for flying yokai. We have the Skittering Shift, which is for the Nezumi. The TN of attack actions targeting you is increased by 1. After the action fails, you can move a range band automatically, and after you defend against damage, you may move 1 range band, so you can skitter around like crazy. The Naga have a wonderful tail sweep, so once per scene as an attack and movement action, if you're in your true form, you can make a martial arts unarmed check targeting 1 character at range 0 to 2 to strike suddenly with your tail. The TM to this check is equal to the target's vigilance minus 1. If you succeed, your target suffers physical damage equal to your ranks in fitness plus your bonus successes with deadliness 1. You can also knock them prone. If they were already prone, they get immobilized. If you have 2 opportunities but you fail, you can move 1 range band. Then we have some new rituals. Some are for yokai, some are for yobanjin, some are for shinobi or yobanjin. Here we have some for monks and one for Yobanjin as well. The final bit is the GM stuff, so I don't want to spoil too much. I think this elemental imbalance is probably going to be a theme in the attached adventure, which of course I haven't seen, but it does discuss interesting stuff like how many people are aware of it, what awareness of that might look like, and how people might react to it. You know, do they ignore it, find someone else to blame, or would they seek out true answers? How would society react? How would individuals react? And how could you present it to your player characters in an interesting way? The effects of it mechanically, which is useful. Ways to identify or perhaps solve local imbalances. And then some useful stuff just about being sensitive about monastic orders, because monks are real people too. In fact, I've met a lot of monks because I am very interested in Buddhist philosophy, and I've been to see the Dalai Lama and various other Tibetan Buddhist monks and monks, all kinds of people. And they have a very rich culture all their own, so it's worthwhile to take the extra effort and portray them sensitively if you are having monastic orders in your game. So good advice on that here. And then there's some more detail about certain key monasteries in Rokugan and how to involve PCs in a monastic order, you know, putting them on pilgrimages, doing all the hard stuff they have to do. And there's a new NPC here, an adversary, Genichiro Maho Outcast. So he's got a 5 in earth and a 4 in void and a 4 in air. He's equipped with a bow. What can he do? Forbidden Outburst. When his strife exceeds his composure, this ability activates. Every character at range 0 to 2 of Genichiro, including himself, must make a TN4 Theology or 3 Void 3 check. If a character succeeds, they receive 2 strife. If a character fails, they receive 4 strife and 2 supernatural damage. Additionally, a character who failed this check becomes cursed until the end of the scene. While cursed, the character increases the TN of all social and college checks by 2. So that sounds like an annoying person to fight. Then there's some tips for using outsiders in your campaign. So from Gaijin to Yobanjin to the Tengu, etc. You know, how can you inspire your players to explore? You know, what sort of destinies might shape these characters from other species? Then we get into our new terrain qualities. So there's a new imbalance variant, and it could be imbalanced in one or more aspects. And then there's also, I skipped over this briefly, but there's an example destinies that could apply to characters that are investigating this imbalance or involved in it in some way. Then we have some new conditions. So oozing sore disease, sounds gross. Gut sickness, sounds gross. Coughing illness, unsteady illness, so it's kind of vertigo type thing. Fire rash, which sounds unpleasant. And then we have some new titles. So an awakened soul. This is someone who has begun to connect with the lives of past people who they once were. And they gain the title ability of Wisdom of Countless Lifetimes. You spend 1 void point to treat your skill rank as 1 higher to a maximum of 6. If you fail the check, gain 1 void point. Cool. You can be a forester. The title ability, once per scene when interacting with positive intentions towards a kami or other nature spirit, you may turn 1 kept die to the explosion symbol. That's cool. Temple abbots get soothing cadence. When making a skill check to communicate with a group of 3 or more people, you may keep up to 1 extra die. Additionally, if your check succeeds, each other character in the scene removes strife equal to your bonus successes. Very nice. You can be a yokai hunter. Once per scene, you can make a TN3 sentiment or survival water 2 check to peer into the soul of a yokai you can perceive. If you succeed, you identify 2 of the following: the yokai's greatest current need, one of the yokai's weaknesses, the yokai's greatest strength, whether the yokai is alone or in a group, and whether they could be parlayed with. Very, very useful if you want to hunt yokai. And finally, as has become traditional in these supplements, we have the tenets of Bushido outline here, talking more about sincerity, what it means, small breaches, and small sacrifices that you might make to correct those. So, as you can see, this video is actually longer than my first attempt, which is unbelievable to me. There was actually a lot of cool stuff in this book. I get that, you know, some pages might seem a little bit light on mechanics, but, you know, I think it's a narrative dice system. As a GM, you've got a lot of latitude here to work with things. You can add, subtract, you know, from checks. You can make things more or less difficult as you please. You can throw all kinds of cool supernatural stuff at players. There's a lot of fun stuff to be had in here, and you can really have unique campaigns with Yobanjin, with Nezumi, with Naga, everything. So I think it's really cool, actually. I'm really glad I bought this. Definitely will be something I'll use in my campaigns. I love having these mythological elements in my games. You know, the quality of the book itself, the production, is just as nice as anything that came from FFG. I presume they're using the same printers and everything. But yeah, you know, if you're at all interested in the wilds of Rokugan, in the Dragon Clan, the Dragonfly Clan, or in being something other than a human, there's lots of cool stuff in here for you. So go check out Writ of the Wilds if that appeals to you. Next time, we'll look at Path of the Waves, which is a really enormous book that, in fact, could be a separate core book if they put the rules at the beginning. So expect another long video from that one. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was useful for some of you. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, take care, and bye-bye.